Hello and welcome to Widow Talk, real conversations about the stuff people just don't talk about. My name is Lauren Leslie Carr. I'm one of the co-founders of First Light Widowed Association and I've been widowed 9 years. Joining me today is Sophie Havers. Welcome, Sophie. Thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you.
Like me, Sophie was widowed by suicide. In 2013, Sophie's beautiful husband, Phil, took his own life after living with mental illness for most of his life. So today we're going to be discussing the complexities of suicide grief and what it's like to be the partner of and to love and support someone who has a mental illness. So Sophie, before we get into some really heavy topics, could you please tell me a little bit about what Phil was like as a person and your love story?
Absolutely. Well, he was a teacher and I'm a teacher's aide, so we met through school, through work, and he was new to the school at the time. And we became friends and just sort of hit it off, and it grew from there. He was very, very passionate about music, literature, incredibly intelligent, witty, funny, but also very deep and very emotional at the same time, which had its ups and its downs.
Yeah. And could you tell us a bit about Phil's mental illness?
Yeah. He suffered from depression for most of his life. He had experienced some abuse as a child. And then later on, it sort of worsened and he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And so he, on a daily basis, struggled with both of those illnesses.
Yeah. And Phil was your second marriage. So could you tell me a bit about how long you were together and what it was like for you both blending your lives and your families?
Yeah, sure. So I had been previously married and had 4 children with my previous husband. We divorced a long time ago, and I just sort of thought, right, I'll be a single mum with 4 kids because who's going to want that? And then I met Phil, and he adored me and placed me on a pedestal and blew my mind that someone would love me as much as he did with all of my what I'd considered baggage. And we were together for 18 months and then we got married, and almost 6 months later he passed away. So all up it was about 2 years. Yeah.
To be widowed after the disappointment of a divorce, did you feel like, on top of the grief, just tremendous disappointment and a feeling of being completely ripped off?
I felt like an absolute failure. I was left with 4 kids, and that my ex basically was like, well, no one's going to want you now. And so I'd felt so destroyed from that anyway, and having to deal with 4 small children. My youngest was only 18 months old and my eldest was 6. And then to find Phil and go, wow, I've got another chance. It was amazing. And then that was taken away from me in the way it was, which was sort of like, oh, well, he can't be with me either. Yeah. So he left. They all leave, you know, so it just confounded that, I suppose, self-loathing that I had, which did make the grief all that much worse.
Sure. Yeah. And can you tell me about how Phil's death came about? If you can take me back to those early days and weeks of widowhood.
Yeah. He had been on stress leave from work already, and had become quite obsessed with some research he was doing, um, which was actually into my ex-partner. And it all turned out that there was nothing he could do in his situation to fix the issues he was trying to resolve. And I think that just became the final blow. Um, he had attempted to take his life several times before, and this time he was very, very distressed and not really talking rationally. So I sort of kind of managed to get him in the car under a pretense of, we just go for a drive. And then he sort of, as we drove along and we came to a set of traffic lights, he sort of looked at me and he went, you're driving me to the hospital, aren't you? And I was like, look, it's just, and he literally just said, I know what I've done wrong before. I've learnt from my mistakes. That's it. You're not taking me to hospital. He jumped out of the car in the middle of the traffic red light and ran. And I was literally left stuck in the car going, oh my God, what am I going to do? And had to find somewhere to park, jumped out, was running everywhere trying to find him, couldn't find him anywhere. And then just basically got in my car and drove around for hours and hours looking for him, trying to call him. No answer, no answer. And then the next day, I thought maybe he would just sort of take some time and calm himself down as he'd done before. Next day, I thought, you know what, his parents were away. So I went to their house to see if he'd maybe gone there. And that's where I found him.
It's just terrible.
Mm.
I lost my husband to suicide as well, and it was a similar circumstance in that we had an argument, and he, as he would tend to do, he had a mental illness and severe depression, and he would run away. Sometimes I would be able to bring him back, prevent him from running. But on this night, I was angry with him and I'd had enough. And he didn't take his, or he took his phone, but his phone was flat, which was one of the things that we were also having a tiff about. And yeah, it's an extremely helpless feeling. But I just didn't think that that would be the time, even though I knew he was very, very unbalanced, very, very unwell, and it's not wise to leave someone alone like that. That night I did. And I experienced some blame from others, blame from his family, certainly blame that I put on myself, going into the practicalities of that day. If I'd just done this, if I'd just done that, maybe he'd still be here. Did you experience anything like that? How did his family, friends respond to you? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt so much guilt myself. As you said, it was he'd done it before, and so you go, oh, are we doing this again? Is it gonna happen again? And because it hasn't happened previously, I suppose I sort of thought, oh well, it won't happen this time. And that guilt of knowing that it did, and if only I'd done something different, he might still be here.
Yeah.
That's huge. And today I still daily feel like that. I don't think that'll ever go away. despite what other people have said to me, you know, he chose to do this. His disease led him to do this.
Yes.
It's not your fault. You couldn't have stopped him. And if you had stopped him, he probably would have done it again another time. And then he might have succeeded. So despite my head and other people's logic telling me that it was my fault, I think I will always say, no, it was.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it was my fault.
Yeah.
His family were unusual, I hope, in their reaction, which was, oh, he's gone and done it this time, without any sort of emotional feeling, which I couldn't cope with. I was astounded and disgusted at them, and we literally have no contact at all. My family and friends obviously were very supportive of me, but a lot of them were like, well, you know, you would have seen this coming, and, you know, you should have got out earlier and all that sort of thing. And I thought, how can they say that? You know, they wouldn't say that if he was dying from cancer or suffering any other kind of illness.
Yeah.
But it was like they were saying it was his choice to do this, but it wasn't. He didn't choose to have depression. He didn't choose to have a mental illness. So I then feel defensive of him
Yeah.
when people that love me are trying to protect me and say, oh, well, it was his thing, not yours. I feel the grief of the loss of him, and therefore I try to defend him, even though to myself I'm so angry with him.
Yeah.
So it's very, very contradictory emotions, I suppose.
Absolutely. And that's the unique aspect, I think, of suicide bereavement. It's such a mixture of conflicting emotions. And I can definitely relate to what you said about, like, your logical brain can tell you it's not your fault, you're not responsible for mental illness. And I can hear from other people that have lost someone to suicide, like, I listen to you and I just want to shake you and go, no, Sophie, it's not your fault, it's not your fault. But then I can't, there's times when deep down I can't say that to me, because I focus on the day and the things that happened that day. And if I'd just done one little thing differently, or if I hadn't got so angry that night, or if I'd, you know, just chucked his phone on the charger for him, this whole thing wouldn't have happened. I would have been able to call him and talk him round. And you can just, yeah, it's been 9 years for me and I still have moments like that. Yeah. You touched on the need to defend Phil in his mental illness, but also that contradiction again, feeling anger toward him. Again, I can relate. So can we talk now about the anger that comes with losing your husband this way, but then also the responses and the anger from others? So yeah, could you elaborate on that a bit for us?
Yeah, sure. So because he had attempted to take his life previously on several occasions, the aftermath of that, when he'd not succeeded and he'd come back to me and he'd be so remorseful and he'd say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I never want to leave you. He would sort of apologize and, you know, I'm sorry that I put you through that. And I said to him, you know what? That doesn't help me. You know, if you do that and you succeed, I'm going to live with that for the rest of my life and nothing will take that away. that will be you doing this to me. And I told him this. And the fact that yet again he did it makes me so cross, because he knew and he did it anyway. And other people will say, oh, it's such a selfish act, and oh, it's the easy way out. And that infuriates me even more, because how can that be an easy thing to do? Like, it can't possibly. And you can't possibly be in your right mind if that's what you're feeling. Clearly, it's an illness, it's a disease, and it clouds your mind. And I read a thing about depression, etc., where they said it's like running through a field in a massive thunderstorm, and it's pelting you with rain and hail, and there's lightning and thunder, and you're madly running through this field trying to get to shelter. But they're expecting you to go, oh, it's fine, don't worry. Above the clouds, above all that, it's a blue, sunshiny day. Who can do that? And these people suffer with this illness constantly. How can they then go, oh yeah, I'll be right tomorrow? It doesn't compute. It doesn't happen. So for me, the anger that I feel and the anger that other people express to people who take their lives, that infuriates me, because I'm like, it's not a choice they've made. They can't help this anyway, any more than someone with cancer can help having cancer. So that really, really annoys me. And then other people who try and say, don't worry, it's not your fault, it's not your fault, you know, he did it. I understand that they are trying to make me feel better, and that they're trying to be supportive of me, but then I want to protect him. So it makes it so difficult for other people to help me in that situation.
Yeah, I can totally understand the anger that people feel toward our partners. I feel so angry at James, and I can love him immensely at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And it's when the people closest to me that I know are furious with him that express that anger, or are very cold when the memory of James comes up. I guess what I'd want them to understand is that them showing that hurts me. Because do you feel that the way Phil died tends to, in many people's minds, define his life?
I think it would, had I been more honest about it.
Okay.
As he was a teacher and therefore had quite a large community, you know, lots of people knew him in the community.
Yeah.
When he died, I chose to lie and say he had a heart attack. A lot of people at work, I'm sure there was a lot of innuendo with, yeah, sure he did. As I said, he'd been on stress leave. People knew he had this mental illness. But living in the society we do, where mental health, suicide have such a stigma, I chose to protect him in my mind. So I didn't say he had taken his own life. I said he had a heart attack. So I think absolutely it would have defined him. Oh, he was that guy who killed himself, you know, and I didn't want that for him. I didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for my kids.
Yes.
And subsequently I have, you know, seen posts on Facebook, and I've made comments, etc., where I've implied suicide and certain people have reached out to me in private messages and have sort of said, oh, is that what happened to Phil? And I'd say, you know what, yeah, it is. And a lot of them I found then opened up to me and shared that they knew someone who had died that way, or they had attempted it, or something like that, that they wouldn't have said otherwise. And I think the problem we have that's so very real is that our society doesn't accept mental illness. It doesn't accept suicide. And, you know, we have all these healthy workplace things where there's a policy and, oh, you can, you know, support people with mental illness. And yes, they do, but it doesn't work. He was quite open with our work about his mental illness. And it was all the, oh, he's on leave again. Oh, he's had to stress out again. Oh, like,
Yeah.
So you think, well, yes, they have to technically accept, okay, this person, my employee has a mental health problem, but it's not accepted. It's brushed under the table and like giggled in the shadows.
Yeah.
So that needs to change, and I don't know how that can change apart from more people going, you know what, I've experienced it, I understand.
Yeah. I completely agree, because many people would say there's more transparency and more conversation and talk about mental health, and I can see it, but you know, in my workplace, yeah, it's like when someone's got, you know, really bad flu or gastro, or you know, a more serious physical illness, there's, you know, tremendous support. And, well, they can't be here, they can't be at work, but then when it's, yeah, mental health, you get the leave, the policies are there, but yeah, it's this tension, and this, some people tend to bristle with it, and that, I think that mentality of, oh, you just gotta, you know, pick yourself up and brush yourself off and get on with it. But that's the thing, like with depression, that can be so impossible and hard to do. So can we talk about now what it's like to be the wife of someone who lives with a mental illness? I don't miss it. I miss James. I don't miss that. I don't miss trying to convince him to get out of the shower, to get out of bed, us having a really fantastic day, and then finding him crying and not knowing why. I don't miss the alcohol abuse, the prescription medicine abuse, and the lying that would go with him covering those behaviours because he didn't want to upset me. I found it really, really hard. What was it like for you?
Absolutely, I agree. I don't miss it at all. It was like permanently walking on eggshells, never knowing in the middle of a wonderful thing, one little sentence or one thing that could suddenly set him off and change the whole mode, the whole mood, the whole day. Having experienced depression myself, I also found it very, very hard when he was in a deep depression, trying to not let myself slip back into it. So I would have to work doubly hard to be positive and helpful to him and to me. So exhausting, exhausting trying to reason with a disease that clearly you can't reason with.
No.
You can do it. Trying to put in all that energy for nothing. Trying to allay these huge outbursts of rage and how could I possibly have done that? And I'm like, what? I don't even know what I did. Like, yes, the alcohol, the drugs, the anything to escape. And then you can't reason with someone who's drunk or off their head, or as well as being mentally unwell. So just exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt...
And uncertain, so uncertain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought before I met James, like I knew what my future would be, and yeah, I just remember like our actual marriage, which was 18 months. It's like it was, yeah, so uncertain. How are we going to find our way through this? How are we going to cope? There was always a plan of care in place, but I don't think James was following it most of the time. I felt tremendous judgment on James's character, but my character and our relationship. We would tell people about James's mental health, but I think my family, friends, some people in his circles kind of saw it as, oh, it's the marriage isn't working, or the relationship isn't working, or Lauren's just exaggerating it. So I felt like there certainly wasn't enough support, and there certainly wasn't enough emotional support. Did you experience the same kind of judgment while Phil was alive and you were trying to support him?
Absolutely. Pardon me. Absolutely. I don't think people could understand, and I wasn't going to sort of expose our life to them, because I know that lots of people were like, oh, he's trying to you've got to get out of there.
Yeah.
Think of the children. You've got it. What are you doing? And I was like, how can I leave someone simply because that's not me. You can't do that. It's not his fault. I stand by him. And people couldn't understand why I would do that. My parents were like, oh, he's so controlling and he won't let you do this and he won't let you do that, and you tiptoe around and da-da-da. I chose to do that. He didn't make me do that.
Yeah.
And if he had a broken leg and was grumpy because he couldn't, walk somewhere, I would have done that too.
Yeah.
So for me, I did, absolutely. And people didn't understand. And all they did, obviously my friends, they were like, well, you need to leave because this is not good for you. But I couldn't. Why would I leave my husband that I love and adore and plan to spend the rest of my life with?
Yep.
No.
Yeah. Oh, look, living with James's mental illness was hard, but there were great days amongst that. And he was still James, like that wonderful person. And so the thought of leaving him, because people said the same thing, like colleagues, oh, just leave him. Just leave him. Like, yeah. They're not worth the trouble. But the thought of that was just horrendous. Like, that would be so much worse. Yeah, it's certainly very, very complex. So what you said that you mentioned to me that you felt the need to tell a lie about how Phil died, and suicide is just shrouded in this shame. How does that sit with you today? And did you find when you connected with other widowed people that same, I don't know, awkwardness around the manner of Phil's death?
Um, Still to this day, my kids don't know.
Right.
It sort of hasn't come up, and I haven't elaborated. He was their stepdad, so, you know, they had some issues anyway, so that didn't really need to come out. A lot of my friends who have found out have been supportive, and that's been fine. But again, there's been the lack of understanding and the anger at him. In terms of other widowed people, obviously people who've had a suicide loss understand.
Yeah.
And I think they're the only ones that possibly can. You know, you can have someone who's nursed their husband through terminal cancer. You can have someone who's lost their person in an accident, and they are angry at you because, well, their person didn't choose that, wasn't their fault, whereas your person chose to do it. So even that difference is huge. And I don't think anyone who has not experienced it can possibly understand. And I can understand why they can't understand, because I didn't understand.
Of course, yeah, yeah. I only told a lie once to a real estate agent when I was looking at purchasing a home, and she asked whether my husband will be coming to look at the property eventually, and I was like, no, and she sort of looked at me like, that's strange, and I was like, oh, he passed away. How?
Oh, yeah.
And back in the day, before I was widowed, I'd always ask people, how? And now I find it such, if it's not a widowed person, I find it such an intrusive question, but it is a natural question. And so I just didn't want to get into it, because when you say suicide, people recoil in a way, I can't describe it, but it's a horrible feeling, because you just know it's just all these thoughts are going through their head of judging you, judging them, judging your marriage, and I almost want to defend myself and defend him and go, we were a lovely couple and we were in love, and he didn't. I feel like sometimes people think it was his way of leaving me, that he. Have you sort of experienced that of? You know, he didn't want to put you through a divorce. He was too nice a guy, so he just killed himself. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, totally insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I said it was a car accident, and it was like, oh dear. And those are like horrible. It's horrible to lose your partner. You know, anyway, but yeah, just the stigma of suicide. I wish it didn't exist. It still does. And that's why I'm so grateful to you for, you know, sharing your story so publicly now, because I think it takes more people, like you said before, saying I've experienced that, to rid ourselves of that stigma. What is life like for you today, Sophie? How have things changed?
I've remarried.
Wonderful.
Which is very exciting. I met my new husband a couple of years after Phil passed, and I'd sort of thought, right, well, that's it. Not going to happen again. Like I said, been divorced, been widowed, not no one's going to want this. And so sort of got myself in a situation where I went, you know what, it's me and the kids, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't need anything else. So then decided, you know what, on my weekends where the kids are with their dad, I might go and have dinner with someone or go to a movie, or, you know, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
And so I went online and attempted the online dating situation, and people would message me and I'd freak out and delete the whole app and go, no, oh my gosh, too hard, no way. And then a few months later I'd try again, and then one day I just went, you know what, it'll be a dinner, whatever, even if it's crappy, I've been out for the night, you know. So I met this man and we hit it off, talked and told him all about my life and all the disasters. He told me about all his disasters, and we both basically were like, well, I don't care if they don't like me, whatever. This is me, here it is. And I think because we were both so open and honest with each other, it just worked. And the next day he came over for lunch and he stayed for 3 days, and we've never looked back.
That's wonderful.
It's really lovely, yeah. So we've just bought a new house together. We've got 6 kids together, and between us, I mean, and we're like the Brady Bunch. And yeah, it's fantastic and wonderful, and I couldn't have ever thought that this was possible.
I'm so glad that you're enjoying life like that again. That's wonderful. Can we talk about self-esteem and how losing your spouse to suicide can really take a massive toll on your self-esteem? It's something I really still struggle with today. I've had relationships since losing James, but I struggle with relationships. I struggle with trust. And yeah, I think I've just pulled the pin on that for me at the moment, put a full stop there. How did you, like, did it affect your self-esteem, losing Phil to suicide? Like that sense of abandonment that comes with that. How did you move past that to take that chance to meet Daryl?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely it did, because it was like I was divorced, so he left because whatever reason, and then Phil killed himself because he didn't want to be with me. So of course I thought, well, you're a useless piece of whatever, no one's going to want you, so that's the way it is, I guess. So self-esteem was definitely very, very low. So I just went, well, it won't happen, I'll just be on my own. So I sort of searched for a lot of things that I could do where it was just me and I didn't need anyone else to do them with. You know, I started doing yoga classes, and you know, I joined a psychic group and things like that, where I just went, wow, this is cool, it's interesting, there's people, but you know, I don't need anyone else to do it with me. And that helped, because then I could be more me.
Yeah, just focus. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think realizing that I could be okay, just me, was a huge step.
Right.
And once I could do that, then I could sort of start to think, well, you've probably got half your life left to live, and you are full of love, and you have a lot to give. So maybe. And I think that little maybe pushed me step by step by step, and eventually I went, yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I can be by myself, and that's okay.
Yes.
And it wasn't I can be by myself, let's get someone else. It was I'm now happy to be me and be okay with being me.
Excellent. Did meeting other widowed people help you in your grief and along the way?
Oh, absolutely, without doubt. I think meeting other widows and young widows was the saving grace. Sitting around a table when I first actually met with a group of widows, and we were all just the same.
Yeah.
I wasn't the one sitting at the table with all these couples and me.
And the sad story.
I wasn't the weird one. I wasn't the like, oh, she's a widow, like, oh my gosh, whisper, whisper, nudge, nudge. I was normal. I was the same as other people, and I could say, oh, God, a stupid husband, and they'd go, oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
Whereas other people would go, what? You can't say that. He's dead. Like, oh my goodness. It was amazing. I think it was the same when I had my kids and I went to mother's group and some mum said, my kid just did this. And I'd be like, oh, thank goodness. So did mine.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah. Anymore. It was so, I think anything you do where you're all on your own and then suddenly you meet someone else who's had the same experience, you just go, oh, it's not just me. Thank goodness. Like I'm not nuts.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely huge.
And it's scary to take that first step to go and meet other widowed people. I remember being so full of fear. And I think I was expecting like us all to be sitting around with tissues and crying and being like a support group. But I just met my first bunch of widows and widowers at a pub, and it was amazing how much laughter there was, and
yes,
just the relaxed feeling of being around people that are just like you. It's tremendous. It's a great feeling. What is grief like for you today? Do you still grieve for Phil?
I think I will always grieve for Phil. I think it's become less minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, month to month. It's just gradually spread out, I suppose, diffused.
Yes.
But I'll still come to the day he died and the week leading up to it, and I get this feeling and go, oh, it's coming. Sometimes a day will happen and I'll just feel really bad and I'll be like, what? And then a few days later I'll go, oh, that was when this happened, or that was some event. Oh, that's why.
Yes.
Other days I'll be leading up to it the day and go, oh, it's going to be really bad. And then the day comes and nothing happens. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? So sometimes I'll go and visit him and hug his rock and sob. Other days I'll sit down and tell him stories and just laugh. Some days I'll go, yeah, don't need to go, don't need to see him. And then sometimes I'll be watching a movie or someone will say something and I'll just instantly go, oh, it's back, for no apparent reason. So it's still like the ocean, and it comes and goes, and sometimes there's a big wave and sometimes there's a ripple, and I never know why, I never know when, and I just ride it.
Yeah. I find films to be particularly triggering. It's surprising how often suicide can feature in films, and I always find that has an instant effect on me, which I really feel for people who lost someone to homicide, because that's always in film.
Yes.
And yeah, but like you, my grief will just pop up and come out of nowhere. I'll have a dream, and then I might be feeling really, really low that morning. Specific dates, but it's calmer seas these days, which is
Yes.
yeah. Do you have any advice for other widows that are just starting out on this journey, that have been widowed by suicide or widowed generally?
Yeah. I would say at the beginning, the most valuable thing that I received was people saying, "This sucks. This is the most horrendous thing, and I hear you."
Yep.
Not trying to take it away, not trying to go, there, it'll get better. Anything, nothing works except going, you know what? Yes, it's so awful.
Yep.
And just being able to be there, sit there, let you not say anything, let you cry, let you laugh, let you scream, because there's nothing that anyone can do to fix it.
No.
But to know that, like you, like me, the pain and the actual physical agony stops. It gets less, it spreads out, it gets less frequent, it gets less painful, never stops. You're never going to lose them in your heart. They will always be with you, but nothing will fix it.
Yeah, but you're a great example of that. I'm an example of that. Like, you can live again and have happy, joyful days.
And I think you can live with those new happy days because of what you've experienced. So it makes you so much more grateful for all the little things, and it makes you so much less critical of all the little things. Like, I can't believe he left the towel on the floor. Who cares? You would give anything for him to leave the towel on the floor if he was back.
Yeah.
So don't sweat the small stuff. Like, realize what amazing things you can have in life and be happy with them.
Yeah, that is such a good point. Sophie, you are tremendous. Thank you so much for being so open with me today, and sharing your story with people out there that are walking the same path or know someone that's embarking on this. I think that point that you made, to those that are watching their friend, their family member suffer a loss like this, is to just sit with them in their grief. Don't tell them to stop crying, even though that's the compulsion. It's such a gift to just be with someone in their ugly, ugly pain, and give them a safe place to be that broken. So thank you for sharing that advice. To our viewers, thank you for joining us. Please go to our website, firstlight.org.au. You'll find resources there to support yourself or someone that you know who is widowed, and you can also access more of our Widow Talk library. Please do reach out to other widowed people if you're going through this. It really helps with your grief. So until next time, thank you again, Sophie, and we hope
Thank you.
everyone has a great day. Take care.